I'm Erica Lynn, and we all know the ocean is the most demanding environment on Earth, consistently testing the reliability and durability of our equipment. When you spend as much time fishing as I do, you know that reliable gear is essential for staying on the water. This is why I went with the Abyss battery to power my trolling motor, electronics, and outboard. The guys at Abyss Battery are rattling the saltwater industry by manufacturing performance marine batteries specifically designed for sonar, outboards, trolling motors, and electronic fishing reels. They're also Bluetooth compatible, so I found checking battery statuses right on your phone while you're out on the water is a huge game changer. To learn more about why Abyss batteries are used by the pros and factory installed by premier boat builders, visit abyssbattery.com.
Hello and welcome to the Publicly Challenged Podcast. I'm your host, Luke Oswald, and I hope you join me on my quest for knowledge to become a better public land hunter, angler, and forager. Stick with this and who knows, maybe we will learn something together. Okay, so I'm sitting here and I am talking to Lindsey Davis. And Lindsey, want to go ahead and introduce yourself?
Sure. Yeah. Lindsey Davis, originally from Colorado, now based in Salt Lake City. And I am a hunter and a gardener and a bird dog wrangler. And I work for the Outdoor Recreation Roundtable, which is a DC-based organization, and generally strong-footed in the outdoor industry and involved in a lot of different projects when it comes to citizen science and kind of merging different outdoor recreation user groups, and just generally a very passionate outdoors woman.
So when you grew up in Colorado, you were kind of a little bit of an outdoorsy tomboy, or was it more just kind of love and super passionate about the outdoors?
Well, so I my parents raised three girls, and I think my dad just kind of, to his credit, raised us as if we were, his kids, not necessarily just his daughters. And so he did all the things with us that I think he would have done with his boys if he would have had them. So we were always camping and fishing, and me in particular gravitated towards, hanging out in the shop with him and learning how to build and use tools, and just was kind of a curious kid. We always had we would always build a pitching mound in the back of the yard somewhere where we could play baseball and stuff like that. So yeah, and my little sister especially, she and I were always kind of up to something, and we were masters at crawdad fishing and probably did a lot to damage the riparian zone behind our house. But yeah, generally very fortunate to grow up with a lot of outdoor exposure. And my grandparents kind of built that legacy into our family by their honeymoon was going on a Boundary Waters canoe trip. And so then they raised their kids going on those trips. And then eventually we started getting to go. So my first extended wilderness experience was one of those canoe trips in Minnesota. And I think we were out for 11 days, and I think I was 10. So yeah, it's, of course we were fishing every day and catching the biggest pike I've ever seen. And yeah, we had a solid upbringing in the outdoors, and of course playing sports and stuff.
That's awesome. Yeah, that's one thing I still need to make a trip and do. And it's crazy that I live so close to the Boundary Waters and still haven't even been up there and done a canoe trip yet. But one
Oh
of these
man, I'm
days,
jealous.
hopefully when my kids get a little bit older. But right now they're kind of at the age to where I don't know if that's really possible, but we're going to get there. So I know you did some permaculture projects and things like that. Can you kind of touch on that and the different work you've done in Mexico and Africa? And I mean, you've been all over and done a lot of things, and it's pretty cool. And I love learning about soil and all the kind of how it ties into farming or practices.
Yeah, of course. So my last quarter of college, I did a program that is unfortunately now closed, but it's called the Sierra Institute. And it was a 2 month field studies program where we backpacked and learned about ecology and permaculture. It was called Bioregionalism, Community, and Sustainable Living, and it was all conducted outdoors. So, which is a great send off for finishing college. It was perfect. And I basically finished the program and then was like, can I work for you? And was fortunate that they gave me a job, and I ended up working for them for a couple of years. And so I guided these 2 month field studies programs where we would teach people how to backpack, teach people about, ecology and bioregionalism. And this was mostly Northern California. And then we'd spend a month at a homestead learning about permaculture and sustainable living and how to grow your own food and how to, kind of work within the ecological resources that you're surrounded by. And then we do another 2 weeks of backpacking, and that was just a super cool time. It was experimental. I remember one season I was supposed to be a like farming apprentice and had moved up there, and a couple days before, we were going to start, they were like, well, the farmer's not coming, so you're in charge. And I was like, what? Like, I'm not at all qualified for this. But they just gave me the reins, and there were tons of books and resources there. And so I had a really cool opportunity to learn and experiment and do trial and error, which you don't always get that opportunity in a work setting. You normally, someone's like, I need you to do it like this, and you do it like that. So I sort of from there just got into this phase where I was trying to learn as much as I could about growing food and natural building and school garden teaching. And, it was during the time where a lot of people were really focused on revamping food systems in schools. And so we saw this kind of integration of growing food and gardening and science and STEM all at the same time. And so I was a part of that. And then when you're trying to make money as a permaculture designer, you have to do a bunch of different things. And, I ended up doing designs for people's individual homes or and helping them implement it if they wanted to landscape their house in a specific way, or if they wanted to start growing a bunch of medicinal herbs or something like that. And so ended up doing quite a bit of consulting alongside teaching, and that took me to some pretty cool places. And I was invited to do a project in Japan at a Japanese temple, where I essentially lived there for 3 months and helped them design an extension of their Zen practice from the temple in the form of a permaculture garden that was in this old persimmon orchard. So yeah, it's been cool. It's been really interesting. I spent a bunch of time building natural buildings in the southwest of Colorado, which was neat. And now it sort of just informs a lot of my hobbies because I work on a computer now in the outdoor industry. But it's been the first time that I've lived in a city in quite some time. And but we're fortunate that we have a big backyard, and I'm able to sort of just live all of those values, even in an urban setting, which I feel very fortunate for, that they're just kind of ingrained in who I am now. And I can also help the people around me to get their garden started, or I think, most importantly, whether you have a swath of land or not, is just building in some way to kind of create that interaction with the environment and around you on a daily basis.
Absolutely. I love getting out and working my soil. But so I got a question for you. How was it when you went to Japan and you built this Zen garden? How did you, was it like same plants or was it like native species that you were working with that were native to Japan, or how, was it relative to stuff we have here? How did you know what to do with all that?
Yeah, there were some challenges there for sure, because then of course the other factor is trying to like find the resources that you know of in your home place in another country, and where you don't speak the language and there's kanji associated with it. And we had this hilarious experience of me being like, we need to find mulch, and they're like, mulch. And they're like, and the direct translation is like bark, wood chunk, or something silly like that. It just took forever to actually source those things. But for the most part, there's an international permaculture network that, thanks to the internet, you can kind of communicate with people and share tips and resources and stuff like that. And the agricultural, like grow hardiness zone, it's very similar to where I was living in Northern California. So it was a familiar ecosystem, even though the species were different. And the cool thing about plants is that if you start to get into taxonomy and sort of the Latin, pattern and system for plant identification, you can work within plant families. There's some pretty cool books about this kind of stuff. One of them is called Botany in a Day. It's one of my favorites. And if you start to think about plants in these kind of bigger hierarchies, then you can understand how they, relate to each other in a way that's super helpful if you're going to change ecosystems a lot.
So I'm actually that's interesting. I'm going to have to look up that book, because with my foraging journey that I'm embarking upon right now, it's interesting to you're starting to learn, Brassica family, and that all the different things that are entailed within that family. And it's like, oh, well, that one's got similarities to that. I wonder if that's an edible or an invasive or what it is. And so that's pretty cool. That's definitely cool. Do you do any foraging or?
Yeah. So before I moved to Utah, I lived in Northern California, and I went in on some land with a handful of folks, and that ecosystem, I mean, it's just the most abundant place in the world. It's like there's always something growing. There's very big mushroom flushes every year. There's the ocean, you have the redwood ecology, you have the oak woodland, which is like, I mean, historically that landscape was one of the most peaceful for First Nations people, because I think because there were just so many resources, and there's like everybody, you didn't really have to be as territorial about what you were eating. But so we did a lot of foraging there. And I think I learned, the most about that ecosystem from my peers at that point, because I was just hanging out with so many scientists. I worked at this place called the Occidental Arts and Ecology Center for 4 years, and everybody there was super knowledgeable about something. And we all just would share hobbies quite a bit. And someone would be like, oh, I'm going on a bird walk, and I'm going mushroom hunting, and I'm going to go harvest seaweed. And so we did all that stuff. And it was so cool to be to have that peer group, because it's really rare, and there's so much you can learn when you like get to get tactile with it, which is, it's just so special. So yeah, we did a lot of mushroom hunting. I forayed with crabbing, but I sort of never really out competed the seals in that endeavor. A lot of seaweed harvesting, a lot of growing food, acorn processing. There's huckleberries, tons of mushrooms, I think I already said. And then of course, just, tons of different edible wild greens and stuff. And then I worked at a nonprofit in Durango, Colorado for a little while. And it was pretty cool because their whole premise was about, it was called the Turtle Lake Refuge. And their whole premise was about relating the health of wild land to human health. And the founder of that organization, her platform was all about edible weeds and kind of reframing our understanding and our label of what weeds are, because most of them are really potent and available medicinal plants. So there was a cafe that she started in an education center where we would serve lunch 2 days a week, and then had all these products that we'd sell in farmers markets and stuff. But everything that we prepared there food wise had some sort of wild food associated with it or in the ingredients. So the days that the cafe wasn't open, there was usually classes where people would come and we would go out into the San Juans and harvest, bring everything back, and then learn how to process it and turn it into cool food. So yeah, I don't do as much of it. I think my harvesting, foraging, I can't really count it foraging, but I hunt now, which is new to me in the last 5 years. And that's kind of where most of my food gathering energy goes here in Salt Lake.
So you didn't grow up hunting then?
No. Mm-mm.
Really?
I'm, yeah, I started hunting when I moved here. So like my late 20s. Um, yeah, it's been a big surprise to become a hunter. No one in my family hunted, and I mean, in my most recent generations, way back, everybody did. Um, but I sort of, I think, connected to moving into an urban environment. Um, when I was living more rurally, I used to have just a closer interaction with my food system, whether it was like through neighbors who would be raising meat, or, I went through years and years of raising my own animals for meat and stuff. And because I had the space to do it and um, the land and kind of time to do it. And then living in a city, it's like, can't really go
Right.
about that in the same way. All the systems are different. And, um, I had, I had become like the roadkill queen in my community where I just loved like the interaction and the intimacy of processing animals and learning how to like preserve them in some way, shape, or form. And at the time, I was working at an education center where we would teach like science camps for kids. And if there was like a carcass or something on the road, we would pick it up and set them out with trail cams with groups of kids, and then go back the next day and look at the photos and learn about succession and scavenging and what animals come out at night and all that kind of stuff. And so I became like the lady that everybody called when there was a dead animal. And sometimes they were like perfectly good deer, and like I learned from some mentors in that area how to really safely assess with roadkill, like whether or not this is something you should eat or not. Um, and so I think over time that gap just started to close for me of like, okay, growing your own food, raising your own food, working with wild animals. And I just realized like, I love this so much. Like there's something that comes so alive in me when I'm getting to like skin a fox and see and experience what it's like to be that close to a wild animal. And then I moved to Salt Lake, and my first friend here is his name is John Chatelain, and he we'd go over to his house and like he's like, tonight you're eating mountain goat, this is elk, this is this, and you like kind of look around and the walls are just covered with stories, and I'm like, tell me about that one, tell me about that one. And eventually he was just like, do you just want to come with me? And I was like, yes. So I went and had a successful harvest my first year, and not knowing how I'd feel the entire time, and just kind of knowing at every step of the way I'll know if this is something that's right for me or not, and haven't looked back.
That's awesome. That's so amazing, because I love hearing about, especially it just really interests me right now with the whole, I hate the word, but I love the process of what a so-called adult onset hunter. It just, every time I hear
I
that word, I
know.
kind of roll my eyes. But at the same time, I mean, I guess that's kind of what it is. To me, it sounds like a disease, or you're being diagnosed with some type of disorder or something. But the actual process of it, or a person that has become that, it's just so interesting to hear these stories of what brought them or what led them there. And I mean, like you said, your background kind of really kind of solidifies that, like that's the next step, right? Other than scavenging for animals, and of course you could do that, but at some point, yeah, that is a natural progression, and that's pretty cool. And then, but what really intrigues me is the fact that not only did you do that, but you chose traditional archery, didn't you?
Oh, Yeah, oh, what a sandbag. So this, yeah, I started off rifle hunting and I had two successful rifle seasons in a row, which was great. And then I have some friends at Mystery Ranch, and now I'm actually like formally on their ambassador team, which is really awesome because they're just close friends that I would do anything with and for. But one of them, Ryan Holm, he he called me last year and he was like, "Hey, I have this idea, and I want to do a traditional bow hunt um, on the American Prairie Reserve. Do you want to come with?" And I was like, "Yes." Like, I was like, "Are you sure you have the right number?" Like, of course I would do that, and because he knew that I wanted to start archery hunting that year, and Ryan has been a witness. There's a lot of people that have been a witness to my whole sort of foray into hunting, and it was really timed with a lot of, I would say, change and attention in the hunting community to diversify our values and who we're talking to and how we're telling the story of hunting. And so I think I just sort of stepped in right at that moment with the perspective to share. And there's a lot of people in the outdoor industry, more traditional ski, climb, hike, that um, maybe grew up hunting or who are, relating to it again for the first time, or who just now started to think about it a different way. And Ryan is one of those folks who was like an avid climber who started hunting later in life. And so I'm very lucky to have gotten that invitation from him. And last year was such a journey. I hunted, how many tags did I hunt? 4 or 5 tags. I hunted more days last year than probably my first 3 years combined. And I didn't punch a single tag. And it was just brutal. And by the end of the season, I was so burnt out. But I learned so much doing the traditional archery path. It just forces you to be a better hunter in every sense of the way. And you know immediately what the mistakes are that you made, which you just don't experience that when you're a few hundred yards away and looking at an animal through a scope. So yes, last year was a traditional archery year. This year will be a compound bow year because I feel like I need a little more support in the archery endeavor at this point. But I'm really looking forward to the lifelong journey of traditional archery hunting.
So when you picked up the longbow and started shooting it, did you go to resources? Did you hire a coach? What route did you take to say, okay, I'm confident, I'm gonna shoot this bow and I'm gonna be successful? What'd you do?
Yeah. Well, so Ryan and I both we worked with a boyer in Colorado named Buddy Gould, who makes these very cool they're kind of a cross between uh, a recurve and a traditional longbow.
Yeah.
He calls them the poison dart, and they're beautiful. They're so beautiful. And so we got those from Buddy, and then we Tom Clum, who's the master
Yeah.
in all of this. He has an online course called I think it's called Solid Archery Mechanics, and it's awesome. So kind of fascinating to learn this very traditional craft from a computer. Like I'd sit down and watch these segments and then go in my backyard and practice, and come back, sit down, watch these segments, go in my backyard and practice. And I just shot every day for months and months and months. And had some help from local archery shops here in Salt Lake, getting my arrows and everything tuned and the weights right. And they say that if you can go out and shoot one arrow and it's safe, lethal shot, then you're ready to go hunting. And I felt confident after, I don't know, 4 or 5 months of shooting very consistently and in a dedicated fashion that I could go do that. And even though it's real scary, because you have to. Archery hunting is it's a different endeavor, and the ethics of it, I think, are just a bit. I mean, they're there with rifle hunting as well, but I notice this a lot with new hunters. Like everybody wants the romanticism of an archery hunt, but I think there's a lot more to it than rifle hunting, and we have to be really careful about how we sort of step into that mode of hunting.
Absolutely. There is definitely a lot of different emotions tied to it and a lot of potential heartbreak that you wouldn't actually see or experience when you're just looking through a scope of a rifle and, being a trigger man. It definitely, and what's kind of crazy is like, so I started my journey and I actually started bow hunting first. So it's one of those things that I was up close and personal with animals a lot more than I was with the rifle, and then kind of went to the rifle, and then it's like, well, this is okay, and I'll do this to procure meat or have a hunt, but like in my head, I can't picture a single hunt that's a dream hunt that's a rifle hunt. Even though I love the San Juans because you talked about those earlier, and that's like special place in my heart. That was where I did my first elk hunt, and it was just amazing. I toted it around a rifle, but I said if I ever come back, it's going to be with a bow in my hand for sure. But those bows, I want to talk about that because we got you were talking, and I just, in my head though, those are some really awesome looking bows. I mean, it's got a wicked reflex deflex on them. I mean,
Mm-hmm.
so were you shooting wood arrows then, or were you actually shooting like a modern carbon type?
Yeah, so I was shooting Valkyrie arrows, which are really cool, like a heavy front of center, awesome arrows, and like the broadheads are one solid piece. They're all hand honed, and um, yeah, I got there was some flack from the small corners of the internet where flack comes from about like this isn't a real traditional archery hunt. Look at you, you're using Sitka and like modern tools, and you're bringing a Goal Zero charger for your phone and whatever. So it was. I mean, it's not. I'm by no means a purist when it comes to like primitive hunting. And yeah, so the arrows were very modern, very cool arrows.
But I don't, it's, that's a tough thing when you've got people that are criticizing, because no matter what, you've got a stick and a string, you've got no sight, you're shooting instinctually, most likely, I'm guessing. And it's just, I mean, that alone presents more challenges than those internet trolls, I'll call them that, have probably ever even encountered, other than sitting in their mom's basement waiting for her to bring them food or something. But it's just,
Sure.
you know what I mean? It makes me mad when you hear things like that, because it's one of those things that we need to be building a community and, building each other up rather than tearing each other down. I, that's like people, Aaron Snyder, all the time, people give him crap about using those plastic fletching veins that he uses, the trad veins that he had developed and stuff like that. And it's like, okay, so I personally, when I first got into it, I didn't even know about, carbon arrows for my, just naturally. One of my buddies was like, oh yeah, I've got this thing. It's kind of like a pencil sharpener, and I taper down a wood shaft and glue on. We'll cut our own fletching out of turkey feathers. And so I went that direction, and yes, it was, but it's not like I was still using a Delrin or whatever the fabric is for a bowstring. It's not like I was using cat gut or sinew or something. So it's like, where do you really draw the line, unless you're like Ishi or somebody walking around in your moccasins that, it's so, I don't know. That's a hard thing to say. And how many people are really out there even doing that? I know there's a few of them. There's that Clay something that does that, where he actually does a traditional bow, but he's still wearing, somewhat modern clothing for the most part. I don't know of anybody that in this day and age does that. So that's kind of
Yeah.
crappy that people would say that, but
Oh, well, and it doesn't affect me at all. I mean, I hunting is so hard. I think even rifle hunting is so hard. Like I started in the mountain west in the high altitude areas of the Wasatch and Uinta Mountains, and it's really tough to do big game Western hunting out here. We have a like very dense wildlife urban interface, a lot of pressure, not a ton of animals. Like it's a very tough place to hunt. And so like I'm not at the stage where I need to make it harder on myself. I'm trying to still be able to hunt successfully and get repetition on all of the steps of the process that need to be ingrained in me to do things effectively and efficiently. And but to each their own. Like I think that's um, one of the most complicated about things about hunting is that we all we all do it for different reasons, and it's always going to be that way. And everybody's going to have their way of going about it and their why for how they engage, and that's that, you know. And so there's no one way, and there never will be.
So you kind of mentioned it, and it was something I kind of wanted to talk to you about anyway. So I'm just gonna kind of talk about it. But the Wasatch Mountain Research Project, it's like a citizen-based research project, right? And that's kind of how you tied in when you're talking about the dense, human interface with it. Can you kind of go into that and what that is and what it's about?
Yeah, so this is it's a citizen science project called the Wasatch Mammal Watch, and it's run by a student at the University of Utah named Austin Green, and he's part of the Center for Biological Diversity lab there. And this is his, I believe it's his PhD project, but I'm not positive on that. But I was a first year participant. The program's now in its third year and has funding, I think, for the foreseeable future because of how successful it's been. But it's a method of using motion censored cameras to study wildlife activity in the Wasatch Mountains. And so, I mean, luckily, I don't know, we have a very perfect environment for it here in Salt Lake and with the Wasatch, because we have the densest wildlife urban interface of anywhere in the country, and more people visit the Wasatch than all 5 national parks in Utah combined.
Wow.
So we have this, and then of course all the mountains are surrounded by desert, so it creates this really extreme concentration of the biological diversity that we have in the mountains, because they're separated from other key habitat areas. And then we have, just immense pressure from development and visitation. So anyway, there's about 100 of us that monitor these motion sensors, just like trail cams, basically same thing. Actually, we use like the same trail cams that hunters love. So they capture images based on heat and motion detection. But it's a way for scientists and researchers to get just like amazing depth with their data, because they're recording 24 hours a day for the entire period of time, rather than, an individual ecologist or researcher sitting there in a snapshot of time saying, this is what I saw. So they're becoming really profound tools for science and research. And we have, I think, 200 camera locations throughout the Wasatch that we all take care of 3 sites for the season, 1 camera over 3 sites, and we move it every month and check on it every 2 weeks and make sure we're not just taking a picture of like a piece of grass 30,000 times, which has happened.
I have had that too.
Oh, so frustrating when you get that. Yeah, but then all the data is compiled, and they're working really closely with the Utah Department of Transportation and the Department of Wildlife to figure out where the species density is in the mountains here, and so we can enact sound conservation strategies for the region. And that's looking at kind of the different pressures that every area sees. And so it's cool now that it's 3 years of data, because we have all these heat maps for where the key habitat is for different species. And so, like, it's very obvious where the cougars are living. It's very obvious where they're not. It's very obvious that the highway is creating a real difference in the elk population density. And it's all just, I mean, I love learning about it. It's part of this kind of obsession with seeing the unseen in nature. This is like all stuff that is happening that we don't usually get to witness, but doing projects like this, you're like, wow, there was a moose here, and then 10 deer came by, and then there was a fox, and it's just so cool. But yeah, it's really neat. It's a really successful project, and I think my personal attachment to sharing about the research is that we are learning that there there's not really a difference in types of recreation pressure with this particular ecosystem. And so often with different recreation user groups, the skiers are saying, oh, well, we're not responsible because, I don't mean to single out skiers, but group X is saying we're not responsible because we're here this time, or hunters are, doing the most damage because they're actually killing something and taking it away, or, anglers are actually like harvesting something, and therefore like their burden is greater on the ecosystem. And really what this kind of research is bringing to light is that it's not a conversation of who's taking and who's not taking from the ecosystem, because the pressure and the disturbance that the wildlife is seeing is causing so much impact that we don't normally account for. And so the animals here have consistent observable behavior Monday through Friday. And then Saturday and Sunday, when everyone's out hiking and recreating, they completely change. And so it's creating overlap. They call it the weekend effect. And it's creating overlap in species that don't normally have it. It's decreasing hunting hours for top predators, and causing all these crazy impacts that we don't really have measured up until now. And so to me, it sort of levels this conversation around who's responsible for what, and sort of minimizes that age-old debate into, are you an impact in your ecosystem by being there? Yes. And then you just draw the line there and say, okay, how do we be, more responsible about this?
That's awesome. That kind of reminds me of, like, I've always been curious about the whole like urban development and the impact upon wildlife and how that kind of affects it, and where it drives them and puts them in different zones and pressure and things like that. And it's interesting to see, and where you have definitive data that way, where you can say, look, we are intrusive, we're impacting them. This is maybe how we could mitigate it or minimize it. That's a good thing to have, because you see so much habitat, just being taken away from them, and then it's like, where does it go? Where do these animals go? And then now you're sending them into other zones, and now they're being pressured even more because you've got human interference with that. That's a crazy thing. But so I want to kind of talk about how you went and you testified in 2019. You went and you testified in front of Congress about conservation and the importance of our public lands and wildlife to businesses, and then that ties into what you're currently working on.
Yeah, so we're in this really cool stage as an outdoor recreation economy and industry, where we're just now getting our sort of chutzpah measured, if you will. Like we're a relatively young industry, 50 years old or something. Like our first leaders are just now starting to retire, and the first CEOs of all these huge companies that we have all the gear because of. And it's only in the last handful of years that there has been studies with the BEA and other parts of the government that are actually measuring the impact that we have as a contributor to GDP. And I'll get to why this is important. I know this is nerdy, but it turns out that we are a huge economic power. We're $887 billion a year. We're 2.2% of GDP. This is more than oil and gas. This is more than computers and electronics. And so essentially what that enables us to do is go to Congress and say, hey, like our industry is really important. Here are the numbers behind it. And we need investment in infrastructure and the national forests, and we need the BLM to be operating well, and we need investment in our recreation infrastructure, and we need public lands to stay public lands, because that's our essential infrastructure as an industry. So it's, I think, a really cool time to be a part of the outdoor recreation economy and outdoor industry in general, because we're all getting organized around our economic impact and what that means for our conservation ability in a new way. So I got invited to testify in front of the House Small Business Committee on behalf of the outdoor recreation industry by this group called the Outdoor Recreation Roundtable last fall. And it was the first time that there had been a hearing for our industry outside of the Natural Resources Committee. So think of it like, again, the government being like, oh, you have needs that are related to small businesses. What are those? And then I was there to kind of explain, like, yes, our needs are very similar to other sectors. We have, trade and workforce issues and all of that. But guess what? Like, our core infrastructure is the outdoors. It is our wild places. It is public lands. It is all these things that, guess what, haven't been reinvested in a long time. And we need the Land and Water Conservation Fund to get its full funding because, XYZ, and just on and on and on. So, it was one of the scariest things I've ever done, one of the coolest things I've ever done, and has absolutely led, been one of the things that has now led me to working for that organization, which is pretty cool. It's, again, just these surprises in life that you can't ever really plan for yourself.
So can you kind of elaborate on like the different groups that are part of that outdoor roundtable then? Because I want to make sure that everybody understands that it's not just, hunters and anglers. It's everybody in outdoors, right?
Yeah. So we're the only group that represents all recreation sectors. So motorized, non-motorized, hunters, hikers, climbers, skiers, everybody. And we're a bipartisan group that's based in DC. And luckily I get to work remotely, even though everybody's working remotely right now. But so all of these different activities that we think about in outdoor all have trade associations that are kind of the key group that advocates for that industry's needs. So, the nuances of what the fly fishing industry needs and how, their specific conservation priorities and how that is either similar or different to, the ski industry. And we are the convening body that brings all of those groups' interests together and kind of holds the national conversation for what recreation as a whole is looking for and needs. So it's, a lot of it is economy-based, trade-based, but then there are these huge public land legislation packages that have a direct impact on our whole industry as kind of the core infrastructure that we depend on in order to build the outdoor recreation economy and industry. So we're the ones that are running around DC, especially my boss, Jessica Wall, knocking on doors and lobbying and making sure that the outdoors is on the forefront of the national dialogue.
I find that kind of interesting because so many times you see divisiveness between these different groups. Say, rock climbers versus hunters, or your average hikers that aren't hunting or doing, angling or anything like that. They kind of almost, sometimes you see it to where somebody's kind of looking down upon you when you're on the trail and you've got a rifle on your back or a bow in your hand. I mean, was there some serious challenges in front of you when you tried to bring these groups together, or how did that all go about, the way of how you got it together? Because I feel like there would be some serious challenges there.
Yeah, there are. I think it's more on the end user side of things, like the leadership in at least the trade associations and the businesses that I work with, I think kind of more inherently understand the importance of collaboration, and how like we have to work together on this large scale, large capacity in order to get people to listen to us. Like the problem and why we're just now seeing recognition in the outdoor industry is because there hasn't been kind of a consolidating effort to come and bring our needs together and then advocate. And basically politicians were like annoyed. They're like, the the so-and-so group comes at 9 a.m. and they want this, and the other group comes at 11 and they want this, and you guys need to get it together. So, I mean, that's kind of the impetus behind two major conservation organizations that we all know of, one of them being TRCP, Theodore Roosevelt Conservation Partnership, and Outdoor Alliance. They're started by their original funding came from the same foundation that said, here, get it, hikers, climbers, bikers, get it together, like form an organization that is going to help you get your policy agenda more unified. Sportsmen, you do the same. So we have, these groups and like TRCP and Outdoor Alliance and Outdoor Recreation Roundtable that are really the convening bodies for helping fix the issues that you're talking about. And I think on the end user side, I think my long-term hope is that, we've done a lot in the last couple of years on the media and storytelling side, I think, to build compassion amongst user groups, specifically hunters and non-hunters. And hunters are getting better at sort of sharing their stories in a way that's digestible for those that don't hunt. And that's our responsibility to do so. And I guess my hope in the long run is that from an infrastructure perspective, we can understand like how people are using public lands and wild places better, so that we can kind of plan for different user groups to have the experience that they're looking for. Right now, it's kind of a free-for-all, and you do end up kind of having overlap with other groups and in ways that's either unsafe or confusing or frustrating. And I think we can do better there.
That's, yeah, finding common ground is really, I mean, literally pun intended, it's common ground. We're all sharing it, right? So it's one of those things that we need to kind of work on to realize that it's all our grounds. Yeah, we definitely need to learn how to use it. Especially, there was somebody, I can't remember who it was, they were telling a story about dirt bikes, and they were elk hunting, and the dirt bikes were ripping by them at just odd times. And then they saw one guy, I think he might have actually been hunting, and it was on a dirt bike, and it's like, do you actually expect to see anything? But anyway, that's a different story for another time. But so kind of run me through, do you have any plans for any hunts or anything like that coming up then? Or is it going to be like a over-the-counter spike bull tag, or what are your plans?
Yeah. Well, it's turkey season right now, and I'm hoping to go out tomorrow. I think we have a couple more weeks. It's kind of low priority. I'm a little cooped up with COVID and kind of just don't want to have crowded natural world experiences right now. But hopefully I can get somewhere where there's not a lot of people. And then this fall I'm just focusing on Utah hunts this year. Partially because of COVID and just, I wasn't really sure what was going to happen with travel restrictions and out of state tags this season. But I have a deer tag. I do what's called a dedicated hunter program here in Utah, which allows me to hunt. It's based on a certain amount of volunteer work every year, which the citizen science project that I do counts for this. But I can hunt the archery, muzzleloader, and rifle season, the whole deer season. And I started doing this last year because I thought it was a safe way to tiptoe into archery season and have rifle season to back me up if I needed it. And I ended up not tagging out at all. But this year, hopefully, I'll just spend a good amount of time on that tag up in my unit, trying my hand at different techniques. And then I'll also get an over-the-counter elk tag here, probably a 3-season elk tag, which I haven't had before. I had a cow elk tag last year, and I think I hunted over 20 days on that tag and didn't tag out, so that was fun. Yeah, last year was a doozy. But yeah, so, and then of course we have our bird dog. This will be his second season. And so I'm really hoping to do a lot more upland hunting this year. And then we usually have, so that'll be grouse, chukar. I just got my Nevada license and bonus points in this past week. So we'll probably take some trips out there for birds. My I guess my pipe dream is that we take a Thanksgiving pheasant hunting trip, but we'll see.
Where do you plan on taking that then? Like South Dakota or something? Or
Yeah,
yeah,
I mean that's the pipe dream at this point. We'll see. We'll see if we can pull it off.
that's always a good one. So do you actually have to get like draw points or draw like a unit or something to hunt in Nevada for upland?
No,
Oh, okay.
but I just bought an out-of-state license, and it's part of what I'm doing this year is starting to, build my longer-term plays with preference points out of state. And so I picked Nevada as a place where I want to eventually be able to big game hunt because it overlaps with us wanting to chucker hunt there anyway. So it makes buying the license a little more tolerable.
Yeah, that's like every year I'm kind of just in that same boat where I'm starting to build points. Some of them I think are kind of hopeless really to even try and do. And I think maybe Nevada might be one of them. That's probably not too doable for me, but that's like Arizona. Every year I have a license and it just goes to waste. I'm like, man, I should go out there and at least do something with it. But hopefully
Yeah.
one of these years I can go and do like the real late season archery hunt that's, January and you've got nothing going anyway. So maybe I could do that. But so that's really cool. That's awesome that you're doing that with the dog. So is he a pointer or a flusher then?
He's versatile. So
Oh,
he's a poodle pointer, which is a versatile hunting breed that does both. So yeah.
that's pretty cool. That's
Yeah,
awesome.
well, sorry. I mean, he's a pointer. He's versatile in the sense that he does upland and waterfowl.
Oh, okay.
So he's not a flushing dog.
So I thought maybe like if you're hunting quail or something, you just send him in to flush them and then, but okay, that makes sense.
No,
So he
he's a
is a pointer.
pointer.
I like
Yeah,
pointers a lot better
sorry.
than flushers. I don't really understand or maybe it's just because I'm not that great of a shot and I'm at the ready then when the dog's pointing, but it makes sense to me. But
Yeah. I don't know. I feel like you have to be a good runner if you're also using a flushing dog or something, or a good
or you have
shot.
to have a
Yeah.
good dog that stays within range, right? That's
Yeah.
the other
Yeah.
thing. I see so many people out there that their dog gets so far ahead of them. It's like, what good is that dog even doing right now? It's just they're so far out that if the dog does flush something up, you're not even going to be able to shoot it. But
Right.
yeah,
Yeah.
no, I enjoy a little bit upland. I don't do enough of it, but I don't know. I tend to focus more on the whole big game thing, but hopefully next year,
Yeah.
because this year's already to me, I'm just writing this whole whole year off already. I'm going to focus on
Yeah.
whitetails this year, but hopefully I can get out and do an elk hunt 2021. That's going to be the year.
Hmm.
I'm going to try and close the deal. Hopefully, maybe in the San Juans or somewhere near there. That's the
Nice.
goal. But I appreciate you coming on. Can you tell people a little bit like where they could find you, all that kind of good stuff, and then
Sure. Yeah, I have a tiny corner of the internet on Instagram, which is just my name, Lindsey Browne Davis, but Brown has an E, so it's a little harder to find than just the norm. Um, and then yeah, I that's mostly just a hobbies for me, a place to share kind of just cool tips and tricks and relate to other people. I really do love Instagram for that. I've built a pretty big community of people that share similar hobbies and learned a lot about hunting through that channel. So I do love spending time there. And then my work with the Outdoor Recreation Roundtable can be looked at recreationroundtable.org. And you can go look at all the different member organizations that we work with. Pretty cool. Um, yeah, I think that's about it.
don't you have like a website or something too, right? That ties it all in with all your articles and everything as well that you've
Yep,
written
that's also true. Which I'm pretty sure it's lindseybrownedavis.com
with an E, Brown with an E,
with an
so
E.
everybody knows. All right, that's awesome, Lindsey. I look forward to seeing more of your content. I look forward to seeing your progression as a hunter, and I want to see you close, maybe notch a few tags this year, and then of course I will hopefully see it on Instagram and give you some likes on that. So I appreciate you coming on. Thank you so much. You have a good day.
Thank you. Thank you so much for having me. This has been great.
Once again, thank you so much for listening to the Publicly Challenged podcast. I hope you enjoyed the show, and if you did, please subscribe on whatever platform it is you're listening to. Also, if you could leave a review, that would help us out. And you can check us out on Instagram or at publiclychallenged.com. And once again, thank you so much for listening to the show.